As I'm coming around the bend and producing 6 new books to launch in a Kickstarter campaign, I've been reviewing options for recording my own audiobook. And thankfully, I've been on almost all sides of audiobook production, from hiring a pro to renting a professional recording studio. Now, I'm looking to create my own recording studio in the comforts of my home. But what equipment will I need? And what are the expenses and challenges I can expect now that I'm leaving the comforts of a recording studio or hiring an experienced narrator? Let's discuss recording your own audiobook in today's podcast, so make sure that you stay tuned. Of course, I have to give a big, hearty shout out to the folks over at Dibbly Create. Introducing Dibbly Create, the ultimate tool for your projects. Collaborate in real time, capture your ideas effortlessly, and supercharge your creativity. With the AI powerhouse Kip, you're unstoppable. Generate summaries, outlines, and even have productive chats. Customize text styles, formatting, and layouts to make your project truly yours. Export with ease, work offline, and stay productive on the go. Unleash your potential with Dibbly Create when you visit my affiliate link at dalelinks.com/DibblyCreate and redefine your creative process today. Dibbly Create, where projects come to life, folks. I've published dozens of audiobooks since starting in this business back in, 2014. In fact, I think my first audiobook came out right about late 2015. And at that time, I was doing 50-50 royalty splits, which I do not recommend. If you can avoid it, definitely do that, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you sacrifice half of your earnings in exchange for getting a narrator to do it for you. And the problem is, it's a 7-year contract, and you never really own the rights to that audio stuff unless you actually pay for it from that narrator. It stinks. And trust me, when you start to generate a good amount of revenue with the 50-50 royalty split, or any type of a royalty split, whatever the platform might be, they're going to charge you a significant amount more than what they normally would for a per finished hour basis, which leads me to talking about per finished hour. Per finished hour works like this. So based on the amount of finished time available on your audiobook, let's say that your book is 3 hours, all right? So that's 3 hours of finished work. So per finished hour is typically how a narrator will charge. So it's usually a good professional narrator is going to cost anywhere, bargain basement, about $125, but you're going to typically see them running about $250 per finished hour or greater. Now, keep in mind that they're not just taking 1 hour to produce 1 hour of your content. It's probably going to take anywhere from about 3 to 4 hours per hour per finished hour. It just depends on how much work is involved. And of course, there's the DIY approach. Now, in 2020, I rented out a local professional recording studio. Highly recommend it, by the way. It's called Amerisound Studios. It's based out of Hilliard, Ohio, so not too far from here. I did that to produce my Amazon self-publisher series. It was great. It was a fun experience. Dan Green, the owner of that, was just a delight to work with. Heck, he was charging me $50 per hour. Now, not per finished hour, because I was producing it myself, but he was charging me $50 per hour. And it was taking me for about roughly in 2-hour audiobook, it was taking about 6 hours of total production time, because it took me probably about a little over a couple hours to do the 2-hour book. Since I'm intimately familiar with the books, it was not an issue for me to kind of read through it. I had a couple stutters and stammers and things like that, but we had that all ironed out. All that to say this, though, that doing the professional recording studio was really nice, but I really want to see if I can save a little bit more money and have a bit more control. Now, that's why I'm coming over to why I'm recording it myself. It comes down to cost, because $50 per hour is not bad. It's not terrible. But to be honest with you, when you have the equipment available to you, why do you want to go and do a studio like this? Now, the nice thing is Dan was fantastic to work with. We got a really good communication system down, so whenever I'd mess up, I'd be able to just stop. He would punch back and punch me back in right where I made the mistake, and we'd just continue to roll on that type of stuff. But I could probably still do some of that on my own, and I'll share with you my creative process for when I'm doing the audiobook narrating. So now I like control too. There are many factors that come into play when you're producing a good audiobook. And though I could go to that local studio and still have some bit of control, but ultimately at the end of the day, if for some reason he wants to place me into a large room with a lot of echo in it, and I have to just kind of trust him into this process. So there was some creative differences that I had with Dan. Love him to death, by the way. No bad words on him here on this one again. Now, also it comes down to available resources. I have a ton of resources when it comes to self-publishing, and a lot of folks that have actually done it themselves. In fact, former guest here of the channel, Rob Archangel of Archangel Inc., helped me out significantly in fine-tuning some of my previous publications that I did through Amerisound Studio and such. So having those available resources really helps out. So that way, if I feel stuck, I can always reach out to someone like Rob, or there's going to be a couple other people that I'll probably sprinkle in as I kind of go on. Now, how am I recording it? Because I live in downtown Columbus. It tends to be a little loud downtown, okay? There's a lot of really heavy traffic. There's some people that need to get better mufflers on their cars, things like that. So I really need to get myself into an isolated space to where I can minimize as much outside sounds as I can. If you've listened to this podcast enough, you probably will hear from time to time some of the noisiness that happens being downtown. It's to be expected. So with me, I'm going to use a walk-in closet. I've got a really nice walk-in closet. It is filled up with a lot of sound dampening elements in it, from boxes to clothes and everything else. In fact, a lot of that's just naturally occurring sound treatment, because you don't just want to simply sit down, put a microphone in front of you and just start recording. You've got to isolate some of that stuff, because it will degrade the quality that you're going to produce if you don't get it to where you're removing echoes, to where you're removing some of that outside sound. So one of the things I learned from an audiobook narrator that had worked with me a number of years ago, his name was Morris. His name's slipping me here. But Morris actually used to go into his own closet, and he would just have all the clothes pretty much filling out all of the racks inside his closet. So all he had to do was put his microphone right directly in front of some clothes and speak right into the clothes to where the microphone's at. So that way there was a lot of sound dampening. It got it to where all people would be able to hear is his sound. Now, what I would recommend, and something I will be doing, is sound treatment panels, because there's going to be certain spots inside your closet or wherever you're utilizing to where it has a flat surface, and that flat surface is going to create some type of an echo, if you will. It's going to get it to where some of that sound is bouncing back, whereas when you speak, you want to get it to where it is isolated as possible. So for sound treatment panels, honestly, I don't have a preference. To be honest with you, I've done a lot of research, and I've seen that it typically runs about $1 to $2 per panel, and each panel is going to be 1 foot by 1 foot, so 12 inches by 12 inches. Figure out the metric system for something like that. What you'll want to look into is going to be, if you're going to get sound treatment panels, find something that has some type of a way that you're not damaging your wall. So if you're renting a place like I do, you don't want to be putting it up with some double stick tape, and then when you go to move out, you're tearing it down and removing a piece of drywall as you're going with it. So I know I've seen Elgato has a more expensive option for sound treatment panels, but they do have the mounts that's involved with that. So I'm not going to need too much. I'm just going to need enough to where it's going to absorb some of the sound on the ceiling, and of course in the exposed walls that the clothes aren't covering up. So just think about as much as you can. Now, do you need to have every inch of your recording space with treatment panels? I mean, if you can afford it, go ahead, but it might be a bit of an overkill. Just get it to where you have it in certain hot spots, and you'll be able to tell when you go through. Test your microphone out, put your headphones on, record it, and then come back and listen to it really carefully. Listen to it for any type of a low or a high noise floor. Now, noise floors are typically where you have the ambient sound of your room being recorded, which is highly recommended by Audiobook Creation Exchange to do that. And as much as I like to poo-poo all over ACX and everything else like that, they actually have a pretty good system for their specs. And if you can kind of follow that, you're actually going to have a pretty decent quality audiobook recording. Now, you won't need many of the sound treatment panels. Just something in front of me is what I'm going to shoot for. So just figure out what's going to work for you and the space that you're utilizing. So the biggest question that comes across a lot of people's ways is, what's the equipment that I'm going to be using? So I'm going to tell you what equipment I'm using, but I'm also realistic in the fact that you're probably not going to be able to swing something like this. It may not be affordable, but keep in mind, if you invest up front, you're going to future-proof yourself later on. So investing a bit more up front is going to make sense because you're going to be able to come to it time and again, especially if you're a prolific author and you're going to be recording more audiobooks. Having good equipment available is going to be the necessary. But I'm going to share some of the more inexpensive options a little bit later here into the podcast, but let me share with you what I'm utilizing. And of course, you're actually listening to me utilizing it right now. Now, of course, I don't have the sound treatment here inside my office, but I use a Shure SM7B. If you've ever watched the Joe Rogan podcast or any other podcasts out there, or my podcast, that Shure SM7B is almost like the gold standard. It runs, brace yourselves, about $400. Yes, it is a bit steep. Now, could you spend more on a microphone? Absolutely. But one of the nice things I've liked about Shure SM7B is its clean sound, and the fact that you can kind of change a little bit and how it sounds through some of the options on the back panel. As soon as you get all that dialed in, it's fairly simple. In fact, Shure SM7B, it's a plug and play type situation. As long as you can get an audio interface that goes directly into your computer, you're good to go. Which leads me over to this very next item. I actually learned this from a good friend of mine, Dan Courier. He actually has a YouTube channel, and he'd picked up a Shure SM7B a number of years ago. And when I went to consult with him about how rich his sound was, he told me, oh, I got a Shure SM7B, and I also have what's called a Cloud CL1 mic activator. Now, this mic activator is a little bit extra. Is it a necessity? No. But what it does is it drops that noise floor. So you remember how I was saying the ambient sound of the room when it's silent, when you're not talking? That's your noise floor. So sometimes it can kind of have like a hissy sound if it's not really good of a microphone. Or in the instance of Shure SM7B, it's great high quality microphone. But the problem is I got to kick that thing all the way up. I've got to turn the volume up. And what ends up happening is the more you turn your volume up, the more it's going to raise that noise floor. Well, what that mic activator does is it drops that noise floor and boosts that signal. So that way your noise floor is lower, your mic is a little bit louder and more rich. Now, I'm going to tell you that the CL1 runs about $150. You find it on sale, usually for about $125. Just keep an eye out for good deals. By the way, the Shure SM7B, I think I ended up buying it right around like the holiday time about a couple of years ago, and it actually ran me about $300. So I saved about $100. So just keep an eye out for good deals. Now, we've got the microphone, we've got the mic activator. Now, so between the Shure SM7B and the CL1, you're going to need an XLR cord, an XLR cable. Now, I don't mention USB microphones for a good reason, because you do have a higher noise floor, so there's a little bit more frequency interruptions in this. So what I like to do is XLR, and I want to find a good shielded XLR cable. Now, these XLR cables are like these fat looking cables, and they have 3 prongs on the end of them. And you're going to need to make sure you purchase that, because I don't recall my Shure SM7B coming with an XLR cable. So you want to get yourself a 2-pack, because you'll need to have your microphone plugged into CL1, and then from CL1 over into your audio interface. You won't need anything super long unless you plan on having your PC or Mac in another space where you're recording it to remove any type of interference or sound from your equipment, because you want to make sure you're isolated. And if you've got this old PC that like is really loud, turns on, its fan just is running, it's going to interfere. And trust me, most places, and especially ACX, is going to reject your file if there's too much noise in the background. All right, so we've got the microphone. We plug it into the XLR cable that goes into the CL1 mic activator, and then it plugs into the audio interface. So my audio interface that I'm using right now is the Zoom H6 audio interface. Now that runs about $250. You might find it on sale here or there. I've got an older model. It might be a little cheaper if you find like an older discontinued model. I know that more recently they updated it back in 2020, and it's called the Zoom H6 Black, I believe. But that's about $250. Not terrible. It's definitely a great option to utilize for two reasons. One, you can use it as an audio interface if you have to be doing YouTube videos. This is a great way. And for two, the fact that it does not require any fans, it doesn't make any extra noise. I can just pick up my Zoom H6, put it on over into my closet space, my recording space, and then all I have to do is just move my mic and my boom and all that other stuff. And I won't need my PC. I won't need my Mac. I don't worry about having to have any type of additional sounds, because trust me, I'm gonna have to keep my ears open for any type of extraneous noise outside of my apartment here in downtown life. So the Zoom H6 mitigates some of that noise and that interference. So you wanna make sure that you, whatever you do, minimize as much of those outside noises as humanly possible. And again, PCs and Macs are fantastic, but they tend to be loud, and you might be on a roll, you're reading some good stuff, and you're just jamming and you're jiving and you're kind of going, all right, this is awesome. And then you go back and you listen to it and you hear that your PC's like, whoosh, like really, really, really loud. So always test, by the way, when you go in to record in your specific space, record it, test it, get up here to listen to it. So anybody that's in your network, any professional, anybody that's an author, you could always join my Discord community and ask a couple people to listen to a specific segment to see what they think about it and if they hear any type of issues. Now, when am I recording? Because I told you that I'm here in downtown life. Well, I'm not going to record it throughout the day. That's just insane. And I probably won't record it on weekend nights. So most likely it's going to be like weekday nights. And I'm going to stick to recording about an hour at a time. I found when I was doing the studio recordings that I was okay for the first half hour to hour. After that hour, what ends up happening is I started getting more fatigued. I started making more mistakes. I started just delivering at a different energy level. So that way, if people are listening to my audiobook later on, they can hear me fatigue. In fact, I encourage you, if you've ever checked out promotional strategies for books over on an audiobook, I definitely fatigued as time went on. And yes, I will be re-recording that book in due time because I did get fatigued towards the end. You can even hear the struggle in my voice as it's getting a little further into the recording. Now, how am I editing and mastering this? So I've actually got a program called Audacity. It's 100% free to use. There are a ton of different tutorials online that you can find about Audacity. When you do look into Audacity, look into a plugin for ACX standards. All right, I can't remember the name of the plugin or the extension or whatever it might be called, but it is free to use. You end up putting the plugin there, and then you're able to record according to the ACX standards. Now, again, I might have had bad words to say about ACX as a distribution platform, but as far as quality control goes, they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. In fact, they've got it down to a science. One of the things that I did on my previous books, and this is what my engineer did for those ones, was we used ACX's Sound Lab after each one of the tracks. We would put the track in there, make sure that it passed, because one of the worst things that happens is you go through, you record all these tracks, you upload it, and then you get back, it's rejected. What? That stinks. ACX Sound Lab, make sure that you have it according to specs. It's going to take lots of trial and error, because you might have maybe not enough space at the very beginning and end, because you have to have 1 to 3 seconds of dead air before each track and at least a half a second to a second of dead air at the end of a track, meaning that you need to have that noise floor. Now, when I go through and I do my recording, I'm going to probably just let it record for however long I'm going to do it for. And then anytime that I make a mistake or I feel like I need to punch back in on something, I'm going to do a clap track. And it's just as simple as going. So then when you're going through Audacity later on, you're going to see 2 spikes. And immediately you should be able to go in, hone in on what that spot is, clip it, remove whatever extraneous issues were happening there, whatever mistake, and then just bring it all together. So that is really just an overhead view of everything I'm doing for recording my own book. And hopefully you'll be able to get a little bit more information from this that you can get yourself dangerous and get started. I want to give another shout out to our sponsors at Dibbly Create. Experience seamless teamwork and creativity with Dibbly Create's intuitive tools and advanced AI features. More recently, they just updated their summarizer feature, and this is really neat. You can take a YouTube video, you can put the link over into the summarizer, and it'll summarize the video for you, and you can use that information however you wish to utilize it. I wouldn't recommend use it to writing a book, but maybe it could probably be a great resource for whenever you're trying to figure out some good source articles that you want to cite within a nonfiction book or something. Visit my affiliate link at dalelinks.com/dibblycreate to get free or premium access today. All right, final thoughts. Can you do this on the cheap? Absolutely. You can find inexpensive USB microphones. Just be careful, read the reviews. USB mics aren't the greatest, but they're also the least expensive. Are they going to be as fancy as, say, a Shure SM7B that utilizes XLR cables, something that's shielded? Probably not. But I'll tell you that there is a number of people who've used USB mics with great success. You can use your own closet with clothes or any type of sound dampening type things. I mean, it could be a blanket, it could be like a quilt, any number of those things. Just experiment with it. Now, let me share with you just briefly, one of my longtime followers, as well as a good friend of mine, William Mays, actually recorded his own audiobook, and he actually used a USB microphone. He sat down, recorded that audiobook in the comforts of his office of all places. Then he took the audio tracks and sent them over to Sandy H over on Fiverr. Now, Sandy is a Fiverr pro who handles editing and mastering for ACX. And I can't remember how much it cost, but it was relatively inexpensive considering. And that could probably be an option if you want to kind of like say, okay, I'll record it all, but I just don't feel like making my ears bleed and eyes bleed, having to go through and edit and chop things up. Totally understandable. By the way, all of the information that I've given you so far, the information is going to be, of course, inside the links, inside the description as per usual here for this podcast. Hey, stick around because next week we're going to be tapping into one of my favorite areas, KDP keywords for books. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and visit that. It's been a long time. So in the meantime, if you've got any kind of questions, concerns, comments, make sure you join me inside the Discord community at dalelinks.com/Discord. Now, are you new to Discord and you're like, I don't know, there's another social media thing, I don't want to deal with the deal? You will love it. There is over 900 other authors and self-publishers there, all super positive, really, really cool. I've only ever had to ban 2 or 3 people because they were being jerks. And you know what? That's already been a few years now that we've only been able to experience that. So join me in a Discord, dalelinks.com/Discord. Till later, this has been Self-Publishing with Dale, and I'll catch you next week.